The Nile. It flowed like liquid sunlight across the desert, a ribbon of life in a kingdom of sand and stone. For 3,000 years, it had nurtured pharaohs, temples, and dynasties that claimed descent from gods themselves. By the 1st century BCE, that world was fading. Egypt was rich, yet fractured. Its palaces glittered, yet debts to Rome weighed like chains. Its throne, once divine, had become a prize in games of politics and survival. And from this fading dynasty, one figure rose, a queen who would defy emperors, a woman who would become legend. Cleopatra, the last pharaoh. Cleopatra VII Philopator was born in 69 BCE in Alexandria, the jewel of the Mediterranean, founded by Alexander the Great. The city shone with marble colonnades, libraries stacked with scrolls, and harbors crowded with ships from every corner of the world. Most rulers of the Ptolemaic dynasty lived as outsiders, descendants of Greek conquerors, aloof from the land they ruled. They spoke Greek, worshipped Greek gods, and rarely learned the tongue of the Nile. But Cleopatra was different. She studied Egypt itself, its deities, its rituals, its language. She mastered diplomacy, rhetoric, philosophy, astronomy. She spoke in 9 tongues, moving easily between cultures. Where others had stood apart, Cleopatra stepped in. She became both queen and Egyptian. When her father, Ptolemy XII, died in 51 BCE, the throne passed to 18-year-old Cleopatra and her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII. By law, they were co-rulers. By reality, they were pawns. Caught in a court full of factions and schemes, Egypt was already unsteady. Famine struck the countryside. Debt to Rome threatened its independence. Within 2 years, Cleopatra was forced into exile. She fled east to Syria, gathering mercenaries, her crown balanced on the edge of ruin. Yet across the Mediterranean, Rome itself burned with civil war. Julius Caesar, locked in battle with Pompey, pursued his rival into Egypt. Pompey was murdered on arrival, but Caesar remained, demanding order. For Cleopatra, this chaos was an opening. The tale is legend. Cleopatra, barely 21, smuggled herself into Caesar's presence. Rolled in a carpet, or perhaps a linen sack, she was carried into the palace under the eyes of her enemies. When the cloth was unfurled, she stepped out, a queen in exile. Defiant, radiant, unbowed. Caesar was captivated, but more importantly, he was persuaded. He chose her side. The struggle for Egypt's throne erupted into war. Cleopatra and Caesar faced her brother's forces at the Battle of the Nile in 47 BCE. The clash ended with Ptolemy XIII drowned in retreat. Cleopatra regained her throne, now alongside another younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. That same year she bore a son, Ptolemy XV Caesar, known to history as Caesarion, her child with Caesar. Whether Rome accepted him or not, Cleopatra had secured a living link to the mightiest man alive. She traveled to Rome, where her presence sparked both awe and outrage. Statues of her likeness stood in the Forum. She lived openly in Caesar's villa across the Tiber, treated not as a guest, but as a consort. Romans whispered of her power, her influence, her audacity. Yet fortune is fickle. In 44 BCE, Caesar fell to the daggers of assassins. Rome descended once more into chaos. Cleopatra fled home to Alexandria, alone, but still sovereign. Rome was divided between Caesar's heirs and generals. Among them stood Mark Antony, soldier, statesman, master of the eastern provinces. In 41 BCE, he summoned Cleopatra to answer for her loyalty. She did not come meekly. She came as spectacle. A gilded barge drifted up the river to Tarsus, its purple sails glowing in the sun. Cleopatra reclined beneath a canopy, dressed as the goddess Isis. Perfume drifted on the breeze, gold glittered on her robes. Music filled the air. Antony, hardened by decades of war, was undone in moments. But Cleopatra was not only enchanting, she was calculating. She secured her throne once again, and in return, she gave Antony the wealth of Egypt, the grain, the ships, the gold that could fuel his campaigns. Together they became partners, and soon lovers. Their union produced 3 children: Alexander Helios, Cleopatra Selene, and Ptolemy Philadelphus. Together they dreamed of an empire stretching from Egypt to Asia, a rival to Rome itself. In 34 BCE, in a ceremony known as the Donations of Alexandria, Antony granted lands to Cleopatra's children and proclaimed Caesarion, King of Kings. The spectacle dazzled the East, but it enraged Rome. Octavian, Caesar's heir and rival to Antony, sharpened his blade. His propaganda painted Cleopatra as a foreign temptress, a sorceress who had bewitched a Roman general, a queen who sought to enslave Rome. Whether true or not, the people believed it, the Senate believed it, and soon, war was inevitable. In 31 BCE, the fates of Rome and Egypt collided, at Actium, a coastal headland in Greece. On one side, Octavian, with his admiral Agrippa commanding Rome's fleet. On the other, Antony and Cleopatra sailing with the pride of Egypt. The battle raged with wind and fire. Ships burned, oars splintered, screams mingled with the crash of waves. The sea itself became a graveyard. When the tide turned, Cleopatra made her fateful choice. She retreated with her ships. Antony, torn between duty and love, followed her. Their forces collapsed behind them. The dream of empire dissolved into smoke. In Alexandria, despair closed in. Octavian's armies marched south. Antony, broken by defeat and believing Cleopatra already dead, fell upon his sword. Mortally wounded, he was carried to her mausoleum. There, in the shadow of death, he died in her arms. The queen who had outwitted dynasties and generals now faced her final endgame. Octavian entered Alexandria, triumphant. Cleopatra, unwilling to surrender her dignity, tried one last time to negotiate. She offered wealth, loyalty, even herself. But Octavian had no interest. He intended to parade her through Rome, a living trophy, chained and humiliated before the mob. For Cleopatra, this was worse than death. On August 12, 30 BCE, she chose her own exit. Some say she pressed an asp to her breast, a cobra whose venom brought swift release. Others claim she used poison, concealed in a needle, or hidden in figs. However it happened, she decided her fate. When Octavian's men found her, she was robed in splendor, crowned as a pharaoh, lying lifeless in her chamber. With her death, more than 3,000 years of pharaohs came to an end. Egypt was absorbed into the Roman Empire, the Nile's ancient sovereignty silenced. Caesarion, her son with Caesar, was executed on Octavian's orders. Her children with Antony were spared, carried to Rome, where their bloodline slowly faded into history. But Cleopatra herself never faded. Rome painted her as a villain, an enchantress who toppled noble men. But beyond the propaganda lay another truth. She was the only Ptolemaic ruler in generations to embrace Egypt. A polyglot, a strategist, a sovereign who stood at the crossroads of civilizations. She was not merely the lover of great men. She was their equal. Over centuries, her image transformed. Poets and playwrights reimagined her. As seductress, as martyr, as goddess, as queen. Artists covered her in gold, dressed her in jewels, crowned her with myth. Films made her immortal once more. Yet beneath every retelling, the same woman remains. A queen who chose her destiny in a world of empires. A woman who carried the weight of a dying civilization on her shoulders. A pharaoh whose life and death marked both an ending and a beginning. The Egypt Cleopatra ruled is gone. Its palaces lie beneath the sea. Its temples stand broken by sand and time. But she remains in statues and coins, in poetry and art, in the imagination of the world. Eyes lined with kohl, crown gleaming against the desert sun. Standing on the edge of destiny, not conquered, not forgotten, but eternal.